Let's do this. How are you doing, everybody? Hi, hi, hi. How are you? How are you? How are you? Put this down a little bit. I can't put it down much because I got a whole new desk set up. Hi, everyone. My name is Luke Thomas. This is episode 180 of my live chat. Thank you so much for joining me. I greatly appreciate it. Let's see, on the docket today, I don't know if you can tell that I have a new setup. There's a whole new setup around the office. This shot should look roughly the same, but there's going to be a bunch of new shots that don't. You know what? I don't like having my chair like this low. And I have to put my tower now under my desk, so it kind of impacts how high I can raise the... Anyway, there's a bunch of stuff going on. Thank you so much for joining me here on this Thursday afternoon, this 16th of November, 2023. So a lot to get to today. Let's see. I saw some questions about Jamahal Hill. I saw some questions about Champ stuff. I saw some questions. There's a bunch of boxing announcements yesterday and today. The Usyk and Fury presser, I think, is going on now or just wrapped up. So there's a lot going on. Whatever is on your mind. Thumbs up if you haven't already. Please do so. Like and subscribe to the channel. It's free. It doesn't cost you a damn thing. And, of course, we'll go for about an hour with the free questions. And then if you want to put in a paid donation, you can at the end. Or you can become a member. And if you're doing the second tier of that membership, you can do it for free. You can put in any kind of wrap up there for free. So your choice. Your choice. But either way, I'm just glad you're here. If you want to just watch for free and you don't want to give a dime, I'm cool with that. I'm just delighted you decided to be here to begin with. All right, so we have a lot of stuff to get to. We'll go for, as I mentioned before, we'll go for about an hour on the free questions, then we'll get to any of the paid stuff. And yeah, that'll be that. So without further ado, let's get this party started, shall we? Let's see. Here we go. Okay, yeah. All right, and there we are. Okay, as I mentioned, a lot to get to, not a moment to waste. Thanks to anyone who has joined through the membership. Thanks to anybody who will join today. Fun stuff. And thanks to everyone who tuned in on Sunday. I know it was a weird change because I didn't do this last week on the normal schedule, but I did get it in, and here we are, right back on the normal schedule. So appreciate that. All right, with that in mind, let's get to the questions. Let's throw them on here if we can. Oh, we got to change that one to this. All right, let's get to these. Let's refresh very quickly. All right, good to go. Here we are. Someone's asking second year of... I'm going to very quickly answer it. Second year of university, planning on writing an essay on the realities of steroid usage and testing within professional sport. Have you got any literature that you would recommend I read? I do this every week, right? I do this every fucking week. The Anti-Doping Crisis in Sport, Causes, Consequences, Solutions by Paul DeMeo and Werner Muller. There you go, boys and girls. That'll take care of you. All right, getting back to this one. Look, what are you reading these days? Working on The Age of Acquiescence by Steve Frazier, which explores the American relationship with organized wealth and power. Myself, I think you've mentioned not finding much in fiction that grabs you, but if you're open to a rec, The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss is pretty solid. Give me just a second, because I think I have a cold, ladies and gentlemen. I have my daughter. My daughter has been sneezing in. Oh, let me turn this off too, by the way. My daughter has been sneezing in my face for several weeks, and I've been amazed that I didn't get sick. Like, truly, and I feel fine. I lifted earlier today, so like I'm okay, but I am a little bit sneezy. More so than I had been before. Sort by, yeah, top. Okay. Let's see. What am I reading these days? Okay, let's pull open the old Kindle. I bought a bunch of books recently. Some I haven't even started yet. I bought yesterday Michael Reed's book on Spain. I bought this book by this dude named Michael Thompson called Cage Kings. How an unlikely group of moguls... fucking hell, hold on. And it goes as follows. Here, hold on. Yeah, here's the title of the book. How an unlikely group of moguls, champions, and hustlers transformed the UFC into a $10 billion industry. But I've only gotten like I've only read the foreword to that. I literally just got it, so that doesn't count. Let's see. What else did I get? What have I started reading? Oh, I am almost done with Rashid Khalidi's. Jesus Christ. Hold on. I am almost done with. Here, hang on. This. Oh, for fuck's sake. That's my daughter, too. Here. The 100 Years War on Palestine by Rashid Khalidi. Rashid Khalidi, Edward Said was a professor of literature at Columbia University. I believe Rashid Khalidi teaches there, but I think he teaches more in, I don't think he's in the literature department. I think he teaches more history and political science. I'm almost done with that one. I haven't finished it, and I've just started as well, just kind of playing around with it. A dude who also went to William & Mary. He used to work for 538. His name is Walt Hickey. Walt Hickey. You Are What You Watch, How Movies and TV Affect Everything. I'm only done the first chapter in this one, so can't say a whole much about that one. But the Rashid Khalidi book is transformative. There you go. That's what I'm reading. All right, let's get back to these questions. Oops. There we are. Luke, no, excuse me. This one, I got to go and given Ngannou success. There we go. All right, Luke, given Ngannou's success, do you believe there's substantial untapped potential for the UFC in Africa or specific countries within the continent? If so, why hasn't the UFC capitalized on this opportunity, and where else globally do you see untapped potential in the combat sports market? I mean, there's simply no denying that there's an enormous amount of athletic talent in any of these untapped markets in the global south, so to speak. Not just Africa. I would imagine if they could really nurture the market, India would be really rewarding for them. China is certainly on its way. Brazil has always been there, so they don't have to worry about that. But there's other parts of Spanish-speaking Latin America that have barely been tapped into, and all of these countries harness enormous amounts of athletic talent. I mean, you know, sort of for example, I'm only going to bring this up because it's the only one that I know more closely. I know you might get tired of me bringing it up, but I can't bring up things I don't necessarily know about. But for example, you know, if we're talking about the global south, you're asking specifically about Africa, but if we're asking about the global south, you know, in Colombia, like, what are the sports they excel at? It's the ones that they have some infrastructure for and some government support for. They've got some success in, like, BMX ridership and whatnot. They have some in cycling as well. Obviously, in, you know, soccer or football, they're pretty good. But the one that I would point to would be their weightlifting team. Colombia's weightlifting team might be the best in all of South America. It might be the best in the Western Hemisphere. It is absolutely excellent, their team, and it's no small consequence. They have a better recruitment policy. They have better state support. They have state facilities. I mean, they've got all the things to make it work in a way that makes sense. They've hired people from coaches from successful programs in other countries. You know, if you applied some of the same mechanisms to some of these other places in either North or Sub-Saharan Africa, I mean, the amount of athletic talent you could probably find is enormous, but there's a lot of things that are going to hold that back. I mean, listen, some of these countries don't have the infrastructure to hold events there, so even if you could recruit talent, you can't go back there and hold an event. I mean, Cameroon, is probably not ready for prime time in terms of having that. I know just to get to Brazil in the 2010s was a Herculean effort for the UFC because a lot of the venues didn't have climate control, which is still true, but they weren't even wired for television. Right? They weren't even wired for television. Now, of course, that's not all the facilities. That's some of them. But I remember talking to Marshall Zelaznik, and he was explaining like why Fight Pass can air in certain places and not, and like what are some of the challenges. And some of these facilities, even in the 2010s, 11, 2012, 2013, 2014, they weren't able to have any kind of television component. You can imagine that there's parts of Sub-Saharan Africa that are going to be like just like that, if not worse. So that's a big part of it. Also, there's other markets that are just a little bit ahead that with a little bit of push, they can go even further, right? The Chinese market having a much more advanced economy than a lot of the poor. I don't want to say that the entirety of Sub-Saharan Africa is poor, but obviously there's a lot of poverty to go around. In China too, but they have had rapid economic development in the last 40 years or so. They've got much better infrastructure. They've got an enormous population. The UFC has a great television deal there. Putting a performance institute makes a lot of sense, right? Same with Mexico. I mean, that can almost be like a bit of a proxy or a hold for the rest of in many cases, probably the Western Hemisphere, but certainly Spanish-speaking Latin America, because obviously Mexico would be in North America. But, you get the idea. I would imagine that they're going to get people from all over South America and then, again, Latin America in general. And then these are also cultures where the UFC not only has a television deal, but they have a ready-made folks who have a background in combative athletics. I mean, all of this is much further along. So, listen, we said this before. I mean, part of the problem with poverty is not just what it does to someone day to day, but then over the course of time, it has this like flattening effect where all of this intellectual capital, all of this like athletic capital, all of this ingenuity and creativity that the individual citizens or groups together could have, it all just gets completely wiped or flattened or pulverized because most folks are just trying to survive. They're trying to hang on. They're trying to just get by, either dealing with poverty, sectarian violence, the leftovers of colonial rule. I mean, you name it. There's just all kinds of fucking problems. So I do think there are probably some countries in South America that are ready to go. Obviously, South Africa is going to be probably a little bit more ready than others. I'm told there's a bit of a crime problem there and a bit of an infrastructure problem, but that's not altogether unsolvable. I don't know to what extent there's any interest in Rwanda, but they have made a massive turn. Interestingly enough, Equatorial Guinea has a rich economy, but they're run by a dictator, so I don't know how much they want to do that. Nigeria might be on that list in terms of having a little bit more development than some of the other places. I don't know to what extent there's any interest in East Africa. And also, I don't know to what extent there's any developmental MMA or martial arts programs in that area. So it's just a lot, man. Part of what the UFC and part of what any major entity would want is I think they don't mind helping to grow the area, but they're going to be much more ready to partner with areas that have some indigenous infrastructure, movements, leagues, fighters, right? There's just a little bit already going on that they can kind of clean up, facilitate, pump some money into, and get it to another place. But, unfortunately, there are just parts of the developed world that are way behind, even by other developing world country standards. It's going to take somebody real special to go in there first and really begin to make it work, and then somebody else will come in after that. But that first few steps of just getting things going, getting regular shows, recruiting fighters, giving them world-class places to train, they're just a long way from that. But is there talent there? There's just not a question in my mind there's talent there. I mean, of course, mathematically, there just has to be. There has to be an enormous amount of talent. All right, here we go. Luke, Dana White recently suggested UFC Fight Pass as a possible option for promoters looking for networks to air future cards. Do you think this could have a negative impact on the sport of boxing if this happens? Also, do you think this could help the future prospects of MMA boxing crossovers if promoters actually do use Fight Pass? I don't see it as any major disruptor. I mean, let's just sort of think about this. Who are the major promoters out there? You've got Eddie Hearn with Matchroom. You've got Golden Boy with Oscar De La Hoya. You've got Al Heyman with PBC, which we know is looking for a home, but in all likelihood, I mean, we're talking about they've got 40%, something like that, of the world's elite boxers. They're not going to go on Fight Pass, I would imagine. They're going to go to a place, wherever they end up, where they're going to get a substantial amount of money to put on these shows. I don't think UFC Fight Pass. I mean, UFC Fight Pass, I'm a subscriber. They have a lot of interesting stuff, but they don't have anything super premier except for the grappling side, which is a very underdeveloped sport relative to boxing. So I don't really see it as any kind of major disruptor, if for no other reason than, yeah, they might have the bandwidth to air all this stuff. There's nothing really stopping them. But the amount of money it would cost to get anybody of significance to sign on I don't think that Fight Pass has that kind of a budget. I mean, UFC could if they really wanted to, I suppose, but I just see that as profoundly unlikely. So you might get some smaller ones like Lou DiBella, who's a good promoter but a bit of a smaller promoter. You might get something like that, and that has some value. But then you'd be at to your point, you'd be at something more of like the prospect level, like deep prospect level, something more along the lines of the showboxy kind of level. You would not get any major. I mean, I can't say you wouldn't. I'd be very surprised if you got any major promoter to sign there. You're going to get a smaller promoter, and it could be a good promoter, but not a guy with a sizable stable whose roster you can pit a lot of guys against and make marquee contests. Let's go back to this. Let me go to this one first. Luke, given the risks and possible pitfalls of the fighter class action lawsuit, what do you think are the chances they settle or actually see this trial through? As someone who likes open markets and think there are real benefits to multiple viable MMA organizations, I would love to see this go through trial and the fighters win. This is really impossible to know, except to say I still think the chance that they settle is the likeliest thing. Because of the cost of how this could blow up for either party. And I think either party knows that. And so because either party knows that, they're more likely to find a solution where they get some kind of win. Whether it's, we talked about it before, whether it's a monetary win, whether it's a monetary win plus some kind of contractual change, something that they can tangibly say is great, and the UFC can give something away without giving away everything. But, UFC has, this is the thing about it, guys. I've been covering UFC a long time. Like, if there is one thing that they always do, they're not stupid. That's not really not at all the case. They're run by very smart people. They're run by capable people. Their law firm that they use is filled with, Harvard and Yale and Stanford grads. Like, these are not people who are dumbasses making bad decisions. However, dude, if there's one central theme to UFC leadership, no, even as it's changed, well, at least since Zuffa bought it, dude, it's always fucking hardball with them. Always. It's always hardball with them. Are they going to play hardball here? Because, look, they could play hardball and win. Imagine if they said, fuck it, let's go to trial, and then they just dunk on the fighters, and the fighters get nothing, and then they're forced to pay the wages of the lawyers, the lawyer fees, essentially, for the defendants. Where they just, the UFC absolutely cleans their clock. That would be somewhat, not the result itself, but the posture, the legal posture, the strategic posture that the UFC would be taking in a case like that. That'd be exactly the same thing they take all the fucking time. It's kind of how I understand them, Again, even with going from the Fertitas to Ari Emanuel and WME, it's they've only ever played hardball, only. But do they want to play hardball here and risk losing everything that big chunks of what they've built? I suspect that they don't. I suspect that they settle. I think the settling is the likeliest, and that gives them some freedom to write their future a little bit rather than being at the whim of what a judge or potentially a kind of jury might ultimately say. I think settling is the likeliest, but these are high stakes decisions. All right, here we go. Let's get some fight talk in. Luke, who do you fancy in a matchup between Poatan and Hill? To be quite candid, I would favor Hill. He will be the small favorite or small underdog, and I think he gets it done. Alex often backs up in straight lines. That's true, and doesn't love move. I think you mean his head. Hill by round 2 KO. I got to tell you, I've been finding some of the rotten attitudes towards Hill somewhat surprising. Yeah, hold on. Let me just put. I can't breathe because my shit's closing up. Hang on. Putting aside the fact that I don't share his worldview at all, I think that he is, I don't know, I have to double check, I don't know this, but I believe that he is a fan of Andrew Tate, which is a decision that I find somewhat incomprehensible. He's not the only one. But I do find that people vastly underestimate his game, like crazily so. So a couple things I've seen about it. Namely, people say he's got a limited game, like he just has boxing. First of all, not true. Just not true. And second of all, even if that was true, I'm not even sure that would necessarily fucking matter. We all know how good Pereira is, and we know what he's good at. At least we have a decent idea of it. And he's only getting better as well. And obviously his kickboxing pedigree is quite literally in the UFC, basically second to none. So it's not that if you believe in Alex that I think that that's some kind of crazy thing, but this isn't kickboxing. The gloves are smaller. The movement inside of the fighting space is very different. And you might be asking, like, why would I have, to the extent that anybody does have confidence in Jamahal, what would be the reasons? Guys, this is like number one for me. First of all, he has fucking excellent vision. Like, excellent vision. Please don't take my word for it. Go look at his fights. Go look at the Jimmy Crute fight. Go look at the Johnny Walker fight. Go look at these fights. And what do you notice? His anticipation, his ability to accurately land shots, his shot selection, and his timing. These are all functions of the fact that he has a very calm and clear ability to see what's happening in front of him and make split-second but very good decisions. His vision is excellent. It makes his defense so good. I don't mean defense by like he never gets hit. I don't think that's quite... Actually, let me look up his numbers. I wonder what his numbers are. Let's see. Jamahal fight metric. What are his numbers? Let's blow this up so you can see it here, and I'll pull it up here. Yeah, that's interesting. Here. There. These are his numbers. So strikes landed per minute, 7.31. That's insanely high, right? I mean, he is active and accurate statistically without any question. Striking accuracy, 54%. That's about right where it should be. Strikes absorbed, 3.35, about average. Nothing too high, too low. It's, but and also he's got a nearly 2-to-1. Actually, he has a more than 2-to-1 positive differential. That's extremely high. Striking defense, 47%. And again, here, takedowns and takedown defense, blah, blah, blah. But you get the idea. What I would say is his vision is absolutely superb. He can see things coming, and he can make great decisions as a consequence. He does not panic. He has total belief in his abilities, total belief in what he sees, total belief in his ability to make use of what he did. The Johnny Walker fight, right? He got off and then came over the top. The guys who can slip in MMA and then counter as they slip, they have just sizable advantages over the rest of the competition because most guys, not in boxing, but even in high-level MMA, are not great at slipping and countering. Dude, Jamahil's very good at it. He's very good at it. He's like very good at slipping and countering or anticipating something and then landing as guys try to blitz him. Like, he's really good at that. So that's one of those games where just that portion of it, people look at it and go, oh, he doesn't do a lot of other things, right? He doesn't go for a bunch of takedowns. He doesn't have insane back-taking ability. He doesn't have spin kicks. He doesn't have, the most amazing ground and pound or guard passing. He doesn't do the full array of things that some of the other guys do, but who gives a shit? Like, he got to a world title without having to necessarily have command and mastery of those skills. But the ones he does have, it's simple. It's not easy, right? It's not some groundbreaking thing that he's doing. People can see what he's doing. So it's simple to diagnose, but it's very, very hard to pull off, to get the timing and to get the accuracy to do things the way he does. And he has the overall vision to do it. That's the first thing. Then getting back to the central argument that he doesn't do other things other than box is simply not true. First of all, he does boxing really well. He's very good at putting pressure on guys, which I think folks underestimate. So many high-level MMA fighters, for as much as they face somebody who is going to put pressure on them, seem to not be great at handling that. And he will put pressure on you, make no mistake about it. Those are some of the first things I'd say. But getting back to the point about his wider array of skills, it's true that I think early to the middle parts of his record, he was somewhat limited. But if you watch the Glover fight, correct me if I'm wrong, he had leg kick. I mean, let's pull up the numbers on this one, right? Am I out of my mind? I don't think I am. What did he do in the Glover fight? Jesus, he beat the shit out of Glover. He 50-44'd him on 3 judges' scorecards. God damn. Glover got 2 takedowns for a total control time of 30. Here, let me pull this up so I can show it to you. Glover got, these are Jamal's numbers, 232 of 402 significant strikes. That's absurd. He only got 2 of 17 takedowns for an 11% success rate. That's Jamahal Hill targeting the leg. Jamahal Hill, so that's 6 leg kicks, 4. Didn't land any in round 3. Didn't land in round 4. So he kind of got away from that there. But in terms of the diversity of striking, doesn't do many leg kicks, but he does, by the way, he did a bunch of front kicks in that fight. He did some head kicks in that fight. And he does target the body at least around 20% or so. Now, he is a bit of a headhunter in that sense. But when you're as accurate as he is, I can understand that. And by the way, hello, he 50-44'd Glover Teixeira. I think people are comically sleeping on him. Comically. Again, if you believe that Poatan can and will win, because even if he tries to put pressure on Poatan, he'll have those great leg kicks that will really change up the game for a guy who likes to work behind the jab at times in Jamahal Hill. Fine. No argument, no issue. I'm not going to fight you on it. It's okay. It's okay to have belief in either guy. I don't mind it. But it's this notion that Jamahal Hill is speaking out of turn because he believes he can win. Guys, he can beat anyone. He can beat anyone in that fucking weight class. There's just no doubt in my mind he can beat anyone in that weight class. Whether he will on fight night, I guess we'll have to see. And again, there's bigger issues at play. Time off, injury. How old is he? How old is old Jamal? Was he 32? Something like that? 31, 32? So, this should be his physical prime, or he should have a little bit longer, assuming he can get back pretty quickly. But I've been blown away by people being oh, why is he so confident about his chances? Guys, he's a fucking former UFC champion that no one took the belt from him. What do you expect him to be? What do you expect him to be? I don't you expect him to be sheepish? Some guys are like that. Everyone runs the gamut or something. You get guys like Yuri who are very, quietly confident. You get guys like Poatan who don't do a whole lot of talking. And then you get guys like Jamahal Hill who, are a little bit on the cockier side. But that's very normal, very typical behavior for people in this line of work. So listen, you can like who you like, pick who you want to pick. It'll be fun. It'll be competitive. I certainly believe that. But for the folks being oh, Jamal, he doesn't, all he has is boxing and he has no chance of winning. Dude, this is just ignorant reasoning. It's just very ignorant reasoning. The tape matter-of-factly does not show that. He is a force to be reckoned with, assuming he can get back from injury in a reasonable time and get back to being himself. But this idea that he's the odd man outs in this division in terms of what everyone else can do, I gotta tell you, I don't think that's accurate. Oh, good question. Luke, if Volk were to lose to Ilia, assuming it's not debatable in any way, does he get a rematch? Great question. Or do they just have Ilia fight Max next? Man, what a question. That is a... So you're positing that not only does Topuria win, but how he wins is not debatable. So here's what I'll say. If if Topuria ends up winning in a way where Volk gets audited a little bit, yes, I could see that. Where let's say it's 5 rounds and Topuria just beats the shit out of him in every round, right? Stops all the takedowns, lights him up with leg kicks, drops him 2-3 times, something where he's clearly not up to par. Then yeah, I think that there might not be much of a case for a rematch, right? When you really go in there and do it. But the likelihood of that seems very low. Topuria, if he were to win, I'm not saying he couldn't win by decision, but in fact, he very well could. But you would imagine his likeliest scenarios would be just straight up stopping him with power somewhere inside the distance, or winning enough rounds to he wins 3 of the rounds, or he has a 10-8 somewhere that changes the scoring. But like going in there and then like Volk doesn't have a chance or doesn't put up any kind of resistance over their 25 minutes seems very hard to square. And so what I would say is, you know, he's had a lot of rematches, right? Well, more recently, I should say that he's had a lot of... Yeah, no, he's had a lot of rematches. He had 3 fights with Max. He's now had 2 with Islam. Could you do an immediate rematch? I mean, the thing is this is the problem. If you don't do the rematch, and so Volk's looking for another fight, does he go to 155? Maybe. If he decides to stay, who does he fight? I guess you could have him like fight Ortega. I guess you could have him fight someone else in the featherweight rank. I mean, Arnold Allen or something. And then Topuria could fight Max. But I guess I'm trying to point out there could be a way where who they would have to fight in a scenario like that might change what the UFC prefers to do. If it ends up being that a rematch is still the most lucrative thing, even if it's not debatable, they'll probably just do that. If it ends up being where, like, you know, they'd rather just have Volk fight Topuria twice than fight Topuria once than Arnold Allen, they'll just do that. I guess my point being is the only way that there isn't considerations about rematches is not even if Topuria knocks him out. It wouldn't be that. He would have to make him look like Volk made Korean Zombie look or something, right? Where it's just like, dude, what the fuck was the point of this? You know, maybe not quite that bad, but because he stopped him too, but something like that, where it's like, do you remember before Spence Crawford, we were like, oh man, you know, there's a mutually reinforcing clause. We're going to get a second one. And it looks like we're going to get a second one. I don't know when and I don't know at what weight, but we are going to get a second one. But Bud beat him so bad. We're like, what the fuck is the point of a second? Like, what on earth? Why would you need a second one? The guy just got housed. And of course, the argument there is always going to be the 147 versus 154 kind of consideration. But, you know, on that night, Bud made it look so bad that you just couldn't even imagine a need for a second Spence fight. But, you know, the business of boxing has other ideas. It would have to be in something like that. You know, we don't have rematch clauses in MMA, so. Good question. You sometimes reference Dr. Mike Israetel, Derek from More Plates, More Dates, and Dr. Layne Norton. Have you ever considered reaching out to try to collaborate with any of them? Sure. Your audience in the know would love it, and I'm sure the ones not aware would benefit and appreciate it. I just don't know how much an MMA audience wants to hear about, like, weightlifting or hypertrophy or intermittent fasting or, you know, non-nutritive sweeteners. I just don't know what kind of market there is for that among you guys. So it's hard for me to really kind of get behind it as a topic to put on this channel. But, like, do I spend my time consuming their work? I absolutely... Dude, I was having a debate with my wife about this, about Dr. Mike Israetel's work on... Not his work in particular, but he had recently done some discussion about posture. And it turns out that the things that most affect your posture are simply genetics. Like this idea that, like, having muscle imbalance up front relative to the back rounds you forward is simply not true. And she was arguing with me about that. And I'm like, well... I think I have a bit of a trump card here that I'm about to use. So I did. So if you guys want to hear from people like this, and by the way, Layne and I follow each other on Instagram. He gave me, I don't use it right now, but I've used it for a long time, the Carbon app, which is his app. He gave me a lifetime subscription to it. Shouts to Layne Norton. He's the man. I love what he does in terms of, you know, randomized control trials. For non-nutritive sweeteners, for fasting, for hypertrophy, for any kind of that stuff. He's really, these guys who bring an academic science background mixed with gym application. Like, these are guys that have been in the gym. Dude, Dr. Mike Israetel, I think, what did I read? He had an overhead press of 275 for something like 8 reps, or maybe even more than that, maybe even like 10 reps. Guys, do you know how fucking strong you have to be to have a standing overhead press with like 8 to 10 reps of 275? You got to be strong as shit to do something. I couldn't do that. I'm not on my best day. Could I do that? for reps. I mean, I probably my best day I could have pushed 275, but for like 8 to 10 reps, no chance. No chance. I think I can find that. As a matter of fact, dude, he had a sick ability. Let's see. Hold on, you got to see this shit because he's so fucking strong. Overhead press. Let's see. I'd have to find it, but yeah, check that out. All right, here we go. Back to the questions from this gentleman here who is a member. Thank you, sir. Hey, Luke, with Jaron Ennis being promoted as the IBF welterweight champion and with Spence and Crawford being busy, are there any potential matchups within the division that you'd be interested in? The biggest fight outside of those two names seems to be a unification with Staniosis. Staniosis would be a good one. Thurman, I think, would be an interesting one. But, you know, obviously with Spence and Crawford gone, that takes away the biggest fights that you really have at that point. I have to look at the rankings and see who's there and who's not. But, yeah, those would be the two biggest ones. Ooh, good question. Luke, besides a weaponized pace, what other advantages does Colby have against Leon? Besides a weaponized pace. Well, he's going to have overall better wrestling, better scrambling, probably, and a better ability to chain things together, right? Like, Colby is very sticky, right? Like, once he gets to a leg ride and then halfway on the back, he's very, very hard to get off. He's very, very hard to, like, remove him, right? He'll hit that leg ride. He'll put the hook in. He'll lift it. And then he'll start working from the back. And he doesn't really ever go super hard for the submission. He just kind of keeps your hands busy and then does busy work on top. Like, it's a very, very difficult thing to do. It's not just the pace of it. It's the skill required to affirm your base there in a disadvantageous position where he has firm control, the ability to land shots, not significant shots, but a lot of uncontested shots, and to chain different kinds of offense together between shots and submissions just to put you on the defensive end. Like, that, to me, like, when I think about like what Colby really does well, people talk about weaponizing the pace. That's part of it. But the other one is he just merely keeps you occupied. He keeps you occupied. The amount of work that he does, the amount of positional control he achieves, and for how long he achieves it, he makes you work. And so you're always defensively occupied, either with the choke or whatever. These are things that he's going to really have to contend with, is to what extent can he create separation. I've talked about this for years. It is not just one thing to stuff the takedown of a very good wrestler. You have to, on top of it, create separation. Because if you just stuff it and then they re-engage and then shove you against the fence, what good is what you've done? You're still there. You may not be on your back, but you are not free to do offense. You are still working defensively on the terms they have set. To me, these are the biggest things he has to overcome. He has to find a way to create separation. He has to find a way to limit the chaining of attacks. He has to find a way to limit Colby's ability to create these sort of like stationed control positions for which he can easily achieve and which he can then stay for a long time. Locked hands. You're going to have to find a way to break locked hands. He likes to get locked hands and then work from behind a tight waist. Like, these are things that I think Leon, having fought Kamaru twice, is well suited to do. But to me, it's not just that everything comes quickly after the other, although that's part of it. Clearly, that's part of it. It's that he has a game situated on merely occupying you. Like, go back to the Robbie Lawler fight. Like, Robbie, if you look at it numerically, Robbie took a bunch of punches and there was an insane amount of control time and whatnot, but he didn't like beat the shit out of Robbie. Robbie just couldn't do anything except get rained on. And I'm not even sure Robbie was tired. I mean, this is the point I'm trying to talk about. Like, I'm sure he got tired a little bit, right? But he wasn't like exhausted. He just couldn't, he couldn't find a way to get out of the spider web. Once the flow starts of what he's doing, it's very hard to escape it. The undertow pulls you. He's good at that. Kamaru was good at stopping that because Kamaru could basically stop him in the wrestling or create separation. So they were forced to exchange on the feet a little bit more. Leon's going to have a similar task. I mean, go look at the Jorge Masvidal fight with Colby. What do you notice? Now, he did get tired because there was weaponized pace. But again, it's this ability to merely occupy you. But the Lawler fight to me is more instructive because Lawler, was worn down, but he wasn't like exhausted. He wasn't barely hanging on. He just couldn't get out from under him. Or I should say he was underneath and he couldn't get out from under where he was. And that's a testament to the pace and the testament to the control, and then how he marries that with these like position stations from which to do work. He's very, very good at that. Okay, good question. Could you please rate current UFC champs on the possibility of becoming a double champ? Ooh, who has more chances? Who has almost zero chances? So let's go through it. Pantoja, very unlikely, if for no other reason than there is parity at 125, and I don't think the UFC is going to be trying to give him a shot at 135, so you can cross him off. Sean O'Malley's an interesting one, because I do think he's a budding star. That might change the equation, but I don't like really his chances to beat a solid 145er. Also, 135 is a remarkably deep division. Topuria / Volk at 155 is a little bit more interesting. We've seen Volk try, but I don't think anyone's going to beat Islam, including Topuria. Islam's an interesting one. Islam, I don't know if he would beat Leon, but I didn't want to see it before. I'd be a little bit more curious about that one. I'd give him a little bit of a maybe. Leon, I don't think he's going to get a shot at 185, and even if he does, I don't necessarily like his chances there, so probably not. Although there's possible. 185 to 205. Well, I guess DDP could go to 205, but that just seems so unlikely. I don't really think so. And then, or even Sean to 205, and it's like, Sean's probably still not a great. Or I should say, Poatan is probably still not a great matchup for Sean. Poatan going to heavyweight is a little interesting. I know there's some. Again, in a world where Tom Aspinall is champion, I don't think Poatan's got much of a shot, but not the craziest thing in the world. And then on the women's side, Zhang Weili going to 125 is possible, but I just think that they have unfinished business, obviously, with Grasso and Shevchenko. Winner there could go to 135. That one seems to me probably the most doable. So there's a couple of spots where it could actually happen, both in terms of what the UFC wants and their ability to actually win. But it's pretty limited, man. It's pretty limited. Okay. Luke, you often emphasize how important film is to a fighter's development and success. As a boxer myself, I find studying tape of pro fighters... Excuse me 1 second. Pardon me. As a boxer myself, I find myself studying tape of pro fighters and tape of my own quite often to break it down. How important do you deem film study to a fighter's success? Thanks for the show, as always. Well, listen, there's a lot of fighters you can talk to who say that they never use it and they feel fine. I understand that. There are situations where fighters look at a little bit of tape and then their coaches look at a bunch so that they don't get like in their own head about what this other person might do. I've seen scenarios like that. Damn, give me a second. Ooh, my nose. But what I would say is, I personally believe it's the most underrated and one of the most useful tools available to any fighter and any coach. I cannot tell you how much I have learned just from watching tape. Like I've learned an enormous amount from the actual training. I've learned some from interviews. I've learned some from practical application. I have learned an absolute metric shit ton from tape. Tape is so important for any number of reasons, in part because it's quite literally reviewable, right? I can actually spend hours going back and looking at the same technique over and over and over and over again, which makes it a little bit, even if you're drilling the technique, there's usually a limit on gym time, partner's willingness, how much time you have for that. So on that level alone, the the amount of it you can do and the specificity of what you can do is unlike basically anything else, including the training environment itself. But more to the point, and this is what I think folks don't understand, tape will reveal certain truths that your articulation of what you do will not. Fighters might believe certain things about what they do or what their opponent does that the tape will not simply show. The tape is much more an indication of the truth of how things actually work out in the real world, and it is much more revelatory and useful as a tool for what will happen next time than just about anything else you can do. These, especially, like, this is what we mean when we talk about these champions who have these large amounts of tape. Dude, when you start having large amounts of tape, guys don't know what, it's very, very difficult for fighters to fend off challengers in that way. It's just extremely difficult. What does that tell you about its value? You not only learn about yourself and what you can see, you also learn, if you're measuring your own, you're learning about what champions do in repetition in the real world over time. What decisions they make, why they make them, everything from balance to shot selection to overall tactical approach to overall strategic approach to round by round changes to footwork to gas to posture to everything. Everything is finally put together on tape, and you can review it over and over and over and over and over again. Very simply, it is an enormously useful tool. It is not true that you can learn how to fight just watching tape. Not true. It is very true that you can learn how to get really good at fighting by training and then complementing it from watching tape. And someone's going to say, oh yeah, you can get it from training. You're going to get there much faster watching tape. Much faster. Like John Jones, to my understanding, every time I've spoken to one of his coaches, have told me he watches a shit ton of tape. Guys, is it any coincidence he's as good as he is? He understands not only himself, he understands what his opponents do in ways that even they don't fully inventory. Guys, when you experience something in the real world, you might remember key details, and some of those key details sometimes other people will miss even if it's on tape. But the opposite is often true as well, that you're not fully appreciative of some of these. Oh, my kid's going to come home. Hang on. You're not fully appreciative of some of these other details that do happen that can have an extraordinary impact on the outcome or the complexion of the fight or everything else. There we go. Hang on now. Very, very different. Very unusual in terms of what tape can provide. So you can't just look at fight film and be like, oh, I know how to fight now. It doesn't work that way. But what you can do is the amount of insight you can derive from what the excellence or mistakes of your peers / contemporaries / the greats offer you is this treasure trove of wisdom, best practices, do's and don'ts, refined details, everything that can't really be taught even over the course of a class through a month. You could show up to some guy's class for a month and not get those. Of course, you can sometimes too, but it's just packed into there. So just in terms of scouting, it's enormously useful. In terms of educating yourself, like ideas you never had about something. Oh my God, I never thought you could parry that way. I never thought to hold my hands in this position. I never thought to angle in that way. I never thought you could exit on a combo that way. Then you watch someone do it and you're like, oh my God, I had never even considered it. My coach never even told me about it, but the tape was there. The tape is this enormous library of information to pull, and some of it will be useful, some of it will be not, but the vast majority of it is typically quite useful. You will learn about, and if you watch a lot of tape over time, people's tendencies through the course of their career, what guys were trying to do at certain times. This is what boxers did in the 80s. This is how footwork changed in the 90s. This is how clinching looked different in the 2020s for MMA or whatever. You can see patterns emerge and thought emerge. And so if you're a really high-level guy, you can see like what might be next and what advantages are people having from the game that they're using that's being leveraged. Like if you didn't understand what Khabib was doing, but you had access to his library, you could figure him out. Not that you could stop it, but you would have a really clear understanding of like what he does, what matters, Like BJJ Scout. You guys remember BJJ Scout? He did a Demi and Maya passing study. It was only because of tape that he was able to go back and then piece everything together and then create this map. And on the map, it was like, okay, if he gets to a tripod here, then he does X, Y, and Z. If he doesn't, then he does A, B, and C. If he gets to the halfway point, then he does this. And then he has all of this map. So you can find out exactly what guys are looking for, how they're looking for it, what the developmental stages of it are, and not ones that are easily taught in class. Like, oh, I went from guard to half guard to side to mount to back. The standard ones everyone knows. We're talking about a little bit of a different one, modified stuff just for MMA. And he was able to put together this entire map. This is only a function of having access to the footage. If you didn't have the footage and you had to just go on memory, you wouldn't be able to do it very well. Or you'd have to go and talk and train with Maya specifically. But having the access to the footage is a complete and utter game changer in every way. The best thing you can do as a fan or a budding analyst or whatever, tape study. I watch tape every day. Sometimes I pick up on a lot. Sometimes I spend an hour and I pick up nothing. Doesn't matter. Watch fucking tape. And the guys who don't, success is a function of many ingredients. But the guys who don't watch tape, to me in general, are less thoughtful. Their coaches are less thoughtful. And in general, though not totally, typically have a lot less success. I have found that the ones at the very top either watch some tape, their coaches watch a lot of tape, or they themselves watch a lot of tape. I don't think that's in any way accidental. I mean, could you imagine trying to have an NFL team and you don't watch tape? A soccer club, a football team, and you don't watch tape? How the fuck would you scout your opponent? It's a window into the truth that only competition provides. Here we go. Could Diego Lopes be a future star in the making? I'm getting Charles Oliveira vibes. Well, Charles Oliveira is a very special case, but I think what I would say is he's got a style that's impossible to dislike, right? It's impossible to dislike Diego Lopes' style. Can't be done. Cannot be done. He has a great guard. He's active. He has good takedown defense, but more to the point, I could go piece by piece. He looks for offense everywhere, in every position, at every moment of a fight, in every round. What else are you looking for if you're an MMA fan? What are you looking for? Isn't that exactly what you want? You want a guy that does that? Well, he's your guy. He's your Huckleberry. People love that. People love guys who have offense everywhere. To your point, in that sense, the comparison's good. Charles Oliveira also has offense everywhere. Now, they have different games. They're different people. And also, Oliveira is much more proven. But I sort of get what you're saying here. I would slow down the comparison given the heights to which Oliveira has extended his success. But, yeah. Dude, you don't have to speak a lick of fucking English for the North American pay-per-view buying market. If you have a style like Diego Lopes does and you're as good as he is, people will gravitate to you immediately. Immediately, yes. I would very much consider him future star. I don't know, but somebody to pay attention to in 2024 as a potential breakout fighter. Yeah, he's definitely got to be on your list, right? So this is an interesting question. Luke, do you foresee Colby finding much success, if any, on the feet versus Leon? Or do you feel his only realistic path to winning is through the takedown? How do you feel Leon's takedown defense will fare versus a wrestler like Colby? It's less about ability for me. Leon is much more skilled on the feet. And it's more about to what extent is Leon too defensive. And Colby not necessarily super refined in the striking department, but again, just doing more work, putting more pressure, making Leon second guess, making Leon wait longer before he throws, overall lowering his volume. Like one of the things you'll see from guys who are really, really good, Volk is like this, but he's hardly alone, is that you'll see that the guys he goes up against, their numbers tend to decline from their baseline. So whatever the average is for that guy, it will be less than whenever they fight Volk because he has this suppressive effect. Colby is very similar in that regard. Do you think that might be the case? Because if that's the case, well, then you're talking about something a little bit different, where it's not so much a question of who's got greater skill in terms of like pure striking ability. It's a question of who can occupy the other's time more effectively, which we spoke about earlier. That's what I would say. I mean, do I think Leon's a better striker than Colby? I don't think there's really much doubt. But in MMA, if you can mix up the threats and then occupy someone to make them think that they don't have the freedom to throw in the way that they ordinarily do, then yeah. But I would also counter that by saying the takedown defense that Leon showed, especially in the third Kamaru fight, was extremely impressive. And, you know, if you had shown me the first fight between him and Kamaru, and then the second fight between he and Kamaru, I'd be like, well, Colby's got a good chance. But then after the third fight, I was like, I don't know if he's got a good chance. Like, Leon really hit his stride in terms of understanding what his assignments were in takedown defense, how to nullify, how to create separation, all of that stuff. Dude, he did a phenomenal job of that, and I think he leveled up through that rivalry big time. That's what happens to the best fighters. They'll find some kind of rival, and it will test them. It will test them. But then the really good ones rise to the occasion, and also, you know, Kamaru did that against previous fighters, right? But in the case of Leon, that rivalry with Kamaru elevated him. It turned him into something different. And that's the problem that I think Colby's got. Colby's got some real things you should worry about, but the level of detail and success from the takedown defense. Let me pull up that. I want to see the numbers on this one from the third fight. Leon Edwards fight metric. Let's see what we got from that third fight. Yeah, man, he was extremely impressive to me. They credit Kamaru with 4 takedowns. He got 5 in the second fight, but he had a control time of just 5 minutes over the course. So let's see these numbers. I'll show them to you here. Takedowns, over 2 in the first round, 1 for 1 with 45 seconds, hardly any time. 1 for 2 in round 3 with about a minute. Not a whole lot. Because remember, some of this is, control time is not just time on top. It's time pressed against the fence. So not a lot of time underneath. 1 or 4 there, 51 seconds. And he got a little bit more in this round. He did a little bit more strike. No, sorry, what am I doing? I'm looking at Leon on top. Yes, sorry. So Kamaru got 1 of 1 here, 0 of 2, 1 of 2. As I mentioned, yeah, this was all right. And then but look at Leon's numbers. He had numerically more in the 5th, nearly double in the 4th, nearly double in the 3rd. It was very even in the second round in that sense. And then the first Leon got more, and the judges had it 48, 46, 48, 46, 47, 47. Pardon me. Jesus. So, yeah, getting back to the question, how do you feel Leon's takedown defense will fare versus a wrestler like Colby? I don't want to sit here and say that Colby's not going to get a takedown. I suspect Colby will get takedowns. Based on what we saw from Leon in that third fight, he's going to have a hard time holding him down. I believe. Plus, also, Colby's 36, hasn't fought in a while. Like, I don't know. I don't know how that's going to go. All right, let's get to these questions here. Luke, can you explain to a casual fan like myself what Jamahal Hill does well? Okay. Well, there we go. We got back to this one earlier. I understand he has punching power. That's true, and his KOs and his record. But besides that, nothing else stands out to me. Oh, guys. Now, I know you're asking in earnest, so I'm not going to kill you. And quote, I struggle to see how he would do well against Alex Pereira. Well, again, I'm not going to go over the whole point again. I'm not going to belabor it. I'm not going to do a big answer here. I'd refer you to what I said earlier. Guys, I think that what's happening is that people really like Alex Pereira, which, no problem. And Jamal's got a bit of a rough around the edges personality. I think that that's probably part of it. And I can understand that if, he rubs you the wrong way or whatever. It doesn't bother me, but your mileage may vary. And I get that earlier in his career, he had a bit more of a defined, narrowed skill set. But even in that defined, narrow skill set, he was very dangerous. And now it is expanding in even more dangerous ways. I think that's a very competitive fight. And I think a lot of folks are going to be surprised when it is. Oh, God, I have to answer this. Did you guys see this fucking goober from Oklahoma? Listen to this. Look, what'd you think about Senator Markwayne Mullin not only challenging Teamsters President Sean O'Brien to an MMA fight, but then going on a publicity tour to justify his challenge by citing Andrew Jackson's duels and the caning of Charles Sumner as historical precedents? Did you guys see this fucking goober? Okay, so first of all, do you guys know who Markwayne Mullin is? Markwayne Mullin was, he's a Republican, but he was I had him on my radio show when I was on Sirius XM. He was a congressman from Oklahoma and fought 3 times in MMA. He was the guy that pulled Mark Ratner and some other Zuffa folks into Congress to testify at hearings before him, because he was the one that introduced the Ali Act to MMA. The extension, essentially. Now, it didn't get anywhere, although it did have a bunch of signatories. Ultimately, it got killed when it had to get reintroduced in committee. And then there was another election, and he went from being a congressman, 2-year term, to a senator, 6-year term. Also, just a much more prestigious role inside the American government. The senator is much more powerful than a congressman, typically. And you thought to yourself, okay, well, all right, he didn't have a lot of success getting the Ali Act going as a congressman, but, I mean, his power has only increased since then. He has not reintroduced it. And, in fact, the folks who were trying to get that passed, the same folks who are involved in the fighter lawsuit, MMAFA, Vinicius Queiroz, Carlos Newton, Nate Quarry, Randy Couture, all these folks. I had them all on my radio show every time they came through D.C. I had Markwayne Mullin on my show when he came through D.C. when he grilled Mark Ratner. You guys can go and find this. You can find the video of him absolutely like grilling Mark Ratner. But something has changed where, even though he obviously still has this MMA background, you can see his ears are a little messed up, you know. He just doesn't want to reintroduce the legislation. I don't know why. He hasn't commented on it. And I know what folks are saying, like, you know, their argument is that the Republican Party doesn't want to challenge corporate power in this way. And I would say, look, he did not too long ago. Like, unless he had like a dramatic worldview switch, I don't really buy that. I don't know why he's not doing it. I mean, I guess he's got other priorities, including wanting to fist fight the Teamsters president. Did you guys fucking see this? Like, one of the most embarrassing things I've ever seen in my life, you know, justifying 19th century duels to justify, you know, completely unprofessional behavior in the floor, or I should say in a hearing for the Senate, you know, is just, you know, remarkable brainworms that this guy has. And it's really unfortunate because his advocacy previously was, I think, really well taken. And it was, you know, he was a Republican, but he was able to get people from, this is true, you can look at the signatories, he got people from both sides of the aisle to sign on to the legislation, to sponsor and co-sponsor it. And he just has given it all up. And I don't really know what the fucking story is there. And it's insanely disappointing, because if you can't count on a former MMA fighter who has spoken openly about, I mean, when I had him on my show, I asked him like why it mattered to him. And he was saying, he told me, he was like, I've seen what promoters do to fighters up close. Like, that's a real thing. That's a real thing. He saw what it was like to be on the other end and have to deal with like shithouse, shady promoter. I mean, he fought in Oklahoma. Like, God only knows what shit he saw. Now, he only fought 3 times. It didn't have like a long decorated record. He was more, you know, hobbyist than anything else. But still, like, these are very, you know, this is a very important experience that he had, and then he's not building on it. And now he wants to kind of have this MMA background to like challenge other, like, I'm going to guess, entities that he sees as diametrically opposed to whatever his political leanings might be. I'm guessing. I don't know. But it's deeply disappointing, man. Deeply disappointing. You thought because there's other MMA fighters in Congress. The woman from Kansas, I forget her name. She fought in Invicta. What was her name? I forget. But she's not very powerful. She doesn't have a ton of like cachet. She's important for her constituency, but not a big name. Dude, Markwayne Mullin is a much bigger name now. He's really leveled up politically, and then dropped this along the way. And if a former MMA fighter can't carry this legislation and sponsor it and reintroduce it, you just begin to wonder who can. I really don't know the answer to that, unfortunately. There you go. All right. If you've got any donations in, we'll take a look at those now. If not, no problem. Thanks for being here. Okay. Let's get to these. Brendan says, how do you differentiate, quote, effective grappling, end quote, that lacks substantive sub-threats, ground and pound, from defense is your own reward from a scoring perspective? That's a great question. I'll tell you the answer to it. Number one, if I'm just laying in your guard, I don't consider that very effective grappling. Right? I'm not doing much. If you keep your guard closed, you're not. You know what? Let me leave your question up because I don't want to take it away. That's not very effective, right? But if I'm constantly making you work, where everything I'm doing, I'm denying you ability to post on a hand, post on an elbow, I'm making you pick your poison between giving up mount or back, and I can't quite get to the submission, you're squirmy, I can't quite get to the ground and pound, but you are doing nothing but defensively answering me, I consider that effective grappling. But more to the point, let's add a little bit of nuance to it. If I'm doing all of that or much of that and you're carrying my weight and I'm able to get asymmetrical positions like the back, right? Where the back, you have almost no offense from the back. I mean, you can flip and stuff like that, but in general, this is not effective punching. You can't headbutt backwards. There's nothing really very effective about it. That's effective grappling to me. And in MMA, you might get a judge who can like see over the course of 3 rounds that like, wow, that grappling is really wearing on him. I'm gonna award that in the way I judge. You might get some of that, but I have found that if I can make you work, and you have to answer me from a grappling standpoint, like I'm putting you in jeopardy, then you're getting yourself out. Then I'm putting you in jeopardy, then you're getting yourself out. I'm putting you in jeopardy, so to speak. I'm upping the ante, and you're having to follow me, and you can't really get anything going. And people will be like, oh, he didn't get a sub, or he didn't get, any ground and pound going. It's like, I'm not here to say that those wouldn't be better. That's not my argument. My argument is not that those are clearly better things. They are clearly better things that should be weighed more. My point is, those aren't the only things that should be weighed. Sometimes fights are not exciting. Sometimes fights are close. And sometimes fights are not exciting and close in the grappling context. This idea that like we only really matters if I get to the very end of a grappling sequence is the submission. The idea that like at least on the submission level I have to get it all the way to that part before any of it really matters is just inherently nonsensical to me. And I think to anybody who's trained that's probably the case too. Like the only thing that mattered was that. That's not really true. If I pass your guard and you have to worry about what that means, I have changed the game for you. And if not a whole lot else happened, but that happened, that fucking matters to me. That matters to me. But it doesn't matter to a lot of folks. It's like, well, he didn't do anything with it. Bullshit, he didn't do anything with it. Again, that doesn't counteract getting lit up on the feet for 3 minutes before that. That's not the argument. But if most of the round is grappling contested and you have to answer me just to stay level or compete, I get that round. I get that round. My wife is texting me. Yeah, please text me more during my podcast. Oh, here we go. There we go. All right. How are strike counts tallied on live broadcast? You don't ever want to look at the... Oh, sorry. Put it up here. Thank you. I'm assuming it's pronounced Jiva. Thank you, Jiva. The numbers on the live broadcasts are always very conditional. I've talked... Dude, Fight Metric is based out of Washington, D.C. They're based here. Their head of the company, Rami, I've known him for almost 15 years. He's a great guy. I love Rami a lot. He's an awesome guy. So I've gotten a chance to talk to them about their methodology and everything about it. But one thing that they are very clear about is what you see on the screen during a fight. I would strongly caution you in terms of taking that seriously. You want to really make sure you wait until the fight is over to get the full tally. There's not really a better answer for that, unfortunately. All right, from Matt, who's a member, What's your Wawa go-to? Boy, I haven't been to Wawa in a while. Let me think about that. My Wawa go-to. My Wawa go-to. Okay, I would probably... Man, I haven't had Wawa. Again, I haven't had Wawa in some time. I think that they do a meatball sub, if memory serves. Right? They do a meatball sub. I think that's right. Probably get one of those. I like to get hot peppers on it. But I won't go too more crazy than that. I mean, it's a fucking gas station. Like, let's all calm down here a little bit. I love Wawa as much as the next guy, but I'd probably have that meatball sub. Okay, from Captain V, who's a member. Luke, I have some bad dates and some great dates lately. What's the worst date you've ever had? Please share all the details. What is the worst date I've ever had? I walked out on a date once. That's true. It was a blind date I got set up on. I was like, yeah, this is not. She's talking to me about her cats. I was like, yeah, I'm out. I had one. I think I've told a story before. I had one where I picked this girl up. This was a long time ago. And I don't know why she said yes to the date. I don't know what the fuck. I mean, if you don't want to go, fucking, we don't have to go. You know, I'm a grown man. Like, you can say no. I picked her up, and first thing she says when she gets in the car was, she was like, yeah, I have to be back in an hour. Not even we had to be back at that place. Like we could only eat, and I had like dinner reservations, like a nice place. We could only be there for like 30 minutes because how much time it took to get there and back. And like, she knew where we were going. So I almost said to her, like, get the fuck out. I mean, I've never had a disaster meltdown where it's like someone chucked a drink in my face or anything like that. But I did walk out on this woman who was absolutely awful. Which I wouldn't do that again, but I was in a different place in my life. And then I did have the one as soon as she got in the car being like, yeah, can we be back in an hour? I'm like, I'm not going to lose my mind here, lady, but if you don't want to go, just fucking say you don't want to go. All right, Joshua writes, with the Saudis being able to have Frank and Eddie in the same press conference, is it possible that a future UFC Saudi card featured Jones and Francis? I mean, if anyone can do it, I suppose it's them. I would still guess, in all likelihood, probably not. But to your point, if they can get rival UK promoters, basically, to work together, then yeah. Then there's... if anyone can do it, it is them. Whether they can do it... All right, Josh says... Any advice for someone learning a new language that can't roll their R's for shit? Also, the Martyr Made podcast has a great series on Israel-Palestine. I've not heard that podcast. Any advice for someone learning a new language that can't roll their R's for shit? You know what's kind of funny is my brother-in-law obviously speaks fluent Spanish, and he can't roll his R's. So he can't say, for example, like, what's the word car in Spanish? ¿Cómo se dice car in Spanish? It's two R's. It's C-A-R-R-O. It's carro, right? He can't say it. He kind of like flicks his tongue. He's more like caro, but he can't say carro. That's how you say it. Or, for example, here in DC is famous for its Salvadorian food. Tons of Salvadorians here. They make something called a pupusa, and if you get it with pork, it's called revueltas. I don't know how to teach someone how to do that. Actually, I'm trying to teach my daughter. Her Spanish is excellent, but she can't really do it all that well either. I don't know if I have. I mean, dude, it's Chewbacca. Just do your own Chewbacca impression. Like, I don't know how to teach someone how to do that. I have struggled trying to teach my daughter how to do it as well, but I have heard native fluent Spanish speakers who cannot do it. I wish I had a better answer for you. I apologize. Welchie writes, if in the unlikely event the UFC and PFL were to co-promote a Jones and Ngannou fight, how would the revenue split need to play out for both companies? 50-50. Oh, yeah, no. Guys, co-promotion, great question. Co-promotion doesn't mean 50-50. It's not. I don't know why people think that. Like, people are like, oh, well, the UFC could bring all this attention and PFL couldn't. Guys, calm down. I'm going to go back to it. We've already seen a version of it this time. Tank and Ryan. Tank and Ryan was technically a PBC Golden Boy crossover event featuring different distributors, in this case, Showtime and DAZN. How much say over the broadcast did Golden Boy get? 0. How much say over the broadcast did DAZN get? 0. That was 100% a Showtime PBC production. DAZN had no role. You didn't see any DAZN commentators. You didn't see any DAZN ringside reporters. Nothing. But they were technically co-promoters, and I'm sure they did something on the back end, you know, not a whole lot, but they did something. And that's in a case where they had Ryan Garcia, right? You know, Ryan Garcia was not as well. I mean, I guess you could argue now Tank is more popular. Before it was somewhat unsettled. But, you know, Ryan was a very, very popular guy, right? DAZN got nothing. Dude, to me, if the PFL and the UFC were to co-promote, it would look indistinguishable almost probably from a regular UFC pay-per-view. They would wear UFC gloves. It would be the UFC commentators. When people say the PFL doesn't have anything to offer in terms of how that event would go, yeah, I believe that. Or at least not much anyway. I believe that. I completely, totally believe that. And we already have precedents for situations when there's an imbalance between the promoters in terms of what value they can provide and who's got the leverage. One just takes over. We literally, we just saw it this past year. So to me, it's not a question of like, well, would it be in the smart cage or would it be in the octagon? It would be in the fucking octagon. Would it be, you know, would there be Randy Couture on the broadcast? Randy Couture ain't going to be on the broadcast. Neither is Kenny Florian. I love those guys, but they're not going to be. It's going to be those guys. And again, we're imagining a world where it happens, but which it may never. But if it were, it would look probably almost indistinguishable from a regular UFC broadcast. Now, how they would handle the title being on the line, I don't know. That would have to be worked out. That part might get a little bit interesting. But in terms of like your experience as a consumer, it would be UFC 400 or whatever number it would be, UFC 320, whatever. Like the idea that this would be, you know, the PFL presents or some shit. They're only invited to the party because of Francis, and I get that completely. This would be, the split would be, you know, not 50-50, not even close. Now, in terms of like how much money went to the fighters, you know, whatever that version was, that split might look a little bit different. I mean, that would be closer to 50-50, right? Like, so before Spence Crawford, it made $55 million on pay-per-view, and it made $20 million at the gate for $75 million. How was it split? It was split 25 to Bud, 25 to Errol, 25 to everyone else, right? You might see something like that, where the fighters themselves take home a, you know, reasonably commensurate amount of money, and then whatever is left is divided between UFC and PFL, whatever. And then of that, the UFC would take the enormous lion's share, of course. I mean, this is what I mean. It's like, oh, they would boost the popularity of the PFL. Dude, you may not even hear the words PFL on that broadcast. I mean, it's even possible you would not even hear that, not even know. You know, this idea that this would be like some PFL, like, you know, PFL sitting up there, like this is like Nixon goes to China or something. Like, no, that's so not what this would be. There's just a lot of fever dreams about like PFL earning things that it didn't earn. Dude, they would take a fucking backseat. And they would deserve to take a backseat. They should not be on par with UFC. They can't offer what the UFC can offer, quite clearly. So, yeah, it would look much more like that. Get a chance to watch A Separation. Yes, I did. You said you were watching something in Farsi on MK, demanding flick, but try the White Ribbon. I have not seen the White Ribbon. So, I saw A Separation. I did. I rented it on Vudu. VUDU. It is superb. It is absolutely superb. The writing is superb. The acting is superb. It brought back a lot of memories. My best friend in the world is Persian, and his parents so his parents were something called Baha'i. I guess the Baha'i religion actually has its home in Israel, but they're not part of the Abrahamic religions. But if you don't know anything about the Baha'i faith, they're completely peaceniks. Like they are avidly anti-war. They're very peaceful people. His family could not have been more delightful. And you can imagine during the Islamic Revolution of 1979, his family lost everything. In fact, that's how they ended up in the United States. The Islamic regime took over. My understanding is they burned all of his property, his family's property, and gave them 24 hours to leave Iran, which they did. And they've never been back, unfortunately for them, which is quite sad. But I guess, it worked out for me that I found this great friend. But his parents barely spoke English. Like when we would go to his house after high school classes, they would, like I would call him. I'm going to say his name is not Steve, but I'm going to call him Steve. I would call his house and his mom would answer and I'd be like, hey, can I speak to Steve? And she would go, Steve is under the shower. Under the shower, because that's how they would literally translate Farsi into English. I mean, that's the level of English we're talking about. And it was just all these people, and they had a huge family, and they were always talking Farsi to each other. And Farsi's got a really unusual kind of sound to it. It's very different than Arabic. But anyway, that was just a personal anecdote. But the movie itself is so fantastically brilliant. Now, people were saying it was like this tour de force. I didn't quite get that from it, but I don't have any complaints at all. The actors are incredible, but more to the point, the writing is insane and the directing is insane. And I won't spoil it for you, but there's a way that every scene is basically shot that focuses in on the character in a way that they kind of like eschew the rest of what is happening there. It's a masterstroke of filmmaking. It's just an enormously well done, well made movie. I'm not going to say The Insult is a better movie. I'm not going to say that, but The Insult, the Lebanese movie that I had told you guys about, I like that one a little bit better, but also because it hits a little closer to home for me. But yes, if you guys have not seen A Separation, go check that out. You can rent it for $4 on Vudu, or I think even YouTube.com. Go to youtube.com/movies and rent it. And people always say this shit like, oh, they don't make good movies anymore. Dude, they make a lot of good movies in foreign languages. You just got to be willing to read subtitles. And this is one such movie. I've not seen The White Ribbon, but your homework is go see A Separation and go see The Insult. These are really, 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 really good movies. Also, on a good Spanish language movie, if you guys have never seen it, Paraiso Travel. Paraiso, Paraiso, Travel. Check that one out. It's about a guy from Colombia who basically goes through the Darien Gap and the Coyotes in Mexico to get across, ends up in New York City, but then ends up getting separated from the people he came with and has to just kind of like make his way in New York City like under the harshest of circumstances. It's fucking amazing. John Leguizamo's in it, who is I think either half or full Colombian. But it's all in Spanish. 100% Spanish, so go check that movie out. Think Shakur can get a stoppage tonight. Dude, Shakur is the fucking man. He's the man. He's so goddamn good. He's so goddamn good. So listen, this dude he's fighting, I'm telling you, man, that guy can thump. Edwin De Los Santos, he can thump. He can absolutely crack. And if he cracks, if he lands on Shakur, I mean, anything is possible, right? Like, he really has that kind of power. He has round, fight-altering power. But Shakur Stevenson's refinement of technique is something that you just can only see in a handful of guys. Bud Crawford's got a level of it. Naoya Inoue's got a level of it. Andre Ward in his prime had a level of it. Shakur Stevenson is the fucking man. You want to see what premier boxing looks like? Have a gander at him. Dustin writes, Luke, I work for UPS and always listen to MK while on my route. Okay. Just so happens a customer came to greet me in the driveway at the same time of you saying, RJ Dunkelgangbang. LOL. All the love from Indiana. Well, listen, I didn't name him. That's up to his parents. You know what I'm saying? Glad to create some laughs for you, bro. Sean is a new member. Thank you, Sean. Afifi asks, if you could ask Dana White a question that he has to answer honestly, what is the question? One question he has to answer honestly. One question. Okay. Ooh. Man, that's a tough one. All right, slap fighting sucks ass, right? No, that wouldn't be my one. But that was so funny. Did you guys see Theo Vaughn on interviewed Dana? And Dana's like, "What'd you think about slap?" And then Theo is like trying to like bend over backwards to make it seem like he likes slap. Guys, if you want an honest opinion, here's an honest opinion on slap. It sucks ass, and it's the lowest form of combat sports for the person who's got the worst palate imaginable for it. So, as I mentioned before, Dana making fun of Showtime. I would watch Crawford Spence in 144p before I watched fucking slap in 4K. But all right, in a serious note, and he had to answer. Well, the question was, he has to answer honestly. Do you admit that the UFC is a monopoly? That'd be my question. Will you admit the UFC is a monopoly? That'd be the only, if he had like truth serum injected into his neck or something. That's what I would ask. Joe says, do you agree the Saudi card is the deepest boxing card ever, top to bottom? Sort of. Do you think the Saudis will keep putting on these type of cards? They will, as long as I guess they see some value in it. Deepest card, I don't know. I mean, sort of, right? Like, there's a lot of. I mean, here's the issue with that card, and it's not really that the card is bad. It's not my point. If you look, well, the Betterby fight is, the Bivol fight is a complete waste of time. But like, dude, Otto Wallin might beat Anthony Joshua. You know what I'm saying? Like, he might do it, dude. I mean, it's competitive. Here's the thing, though. Here's the thing about that card, and I said this before. If you look at the card, you'll be like, dude, that's a decent fight. I like that one. I don't like that one so much. I like this one better. But, like, you can look up and down it, and you can see some respectable names, and in a couple of cases, definitely some good fights. There's, like, the idea that there's, like, no good fights on the card. Absolutely not true. But not one of those fights is what the market was asking for. Like, before that card was announced, no one was asking for Otto Wallin versus Anthony Joshua. There was no organic push to get that fight made from the fan base or the media whatsoever. Zero. And it's like, I said this on Twitter, it's like, I understand that, they're probably doing the best. I mean, if the Saudi money isn't good enough to get Wilder versus Joshua, then, I don't know what is. But the point is, like, the market demanded steak and they got salad, and everyone's like, I'll take it. I'll take it too. I'm not telling you it's a bad card. I'm not saying it's a bad card, but there is this real disconnect between what the market was actually demanding and what was actually delivered. They're not the same. It's just that they had this, like, smorgasbord of all these other choices on there, and, like, the total weight of it, you're like, that's pretty good. I'll take that. Fine. I'm not even arguing against watching it. That's nothing what I'm saying. But this idea that, like, oh my God, like, they really delivered. Like, they sort of delivered. They put a lot of big names on a card, and they put some respectable fights on there. But what they didn't do was look at what the sport was demanding and then deliver it on a fight card. They didn't do that. They tried an approximate version of that. And they got close in certain cases. But, that's it. All right. Andrew writes, is the current political landscape in the U.S. holding back the progression of MMA? The current political landscape? Or is there room to grow under White in his philosophy? Is the current political landscape in the U.S. holding back the progression? You might be able to argue, or rather a better question might be, is the political leanings and orientations of the UFC, which are now explicitly right-wing, is that holding back the sport? And that really will depend. As I've said before, you are definitely going to drive away. I mean, listen, let's just be honest. If Dana White had walked out with Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders, who's a big right left-wing, I don't know, who the fuck's like a left-wing star or something in the way that, like, Kid Rock is, whoever the fuck whoever the version of that might be, and then they had Tucker Carlson. So imagine they had, I don't know, Chris Hayes or some shit, right? They're not the equivalent, but you get the idea. And he walked out, right? There'd be a lot of people who were like, ugh, and they would turn it off and they would want to go away. But conversely, there would also be a lot of people that would be like, yeah. So it's the same kind of thing. Who was it? It was Trump, Kid Rock, it was Tucker, and it was Dana. So there's going to be people who see that and they're going to be like, oh, that's great. I definitely want to get on board with that. And then conversely, there's going to be people who look at that and say, that's not for me. So that's not a question of like, did you get more or less fans? But what I do think is happening, and I'm already seeing it over and over again, is it will make the fan base more homogenous. That part it will do. It will drive away people who find that kind of leaning odious, and it will recruit people who really enjoy that kind of a thing. And so it will give you less of a mix of the audience in terms of personal political leanings, and it will give you a little bit more of one side of it. I got to tell you, like, this whole idea that the UFC was going to pay some penalty for Bud Light, I didn't buy that shit at all. Guys, they have a monopoly on the market. Where are you going to go? Where are you going to go to watch MMA outside of that? I mean, yes, there's a good Bellator show, but they're almost done. PFL, we'll see what happens. But, PFL and Bellator don't have a fan base. I mean, they've got some people that watch them exclusively, but not really. Like, they don't have a fan base in the way that Pride had a fan base. To an extent, even WEC had a fan base, or I'm trying to think of another one. Dream, to an extent, overseas. KSW has a fan base, right? KSW has a fan base. It's Polish predominantly, but they have a fan base. And Bellator has a fan base, I guess, in Ireland and stuff like that. But domestically, they don't have one, and neither does PFL either. They might have one in France by virtue of having Cedric Doumbé or whatever. But you get the idea. So I do think it will create some homogeneity. But whether there will be some kind of social cost to be paid for it, I don't think so. I mean, you're already on ESPN, which is owned by Disney. This is as mainstream as it gets. I don't know what would be more mainstream than what they are. Again, it does turn off some people, but it recruits, seemingly just as many, if not more. So it's not that there's no cost to pay. It's just that in the wash, do you come out with less or more? And I guess we'll have to see how things go. But to this point, I would argue it's disingenuous to look at the situation and think the UFC is going to suffer. The current evidence does not support that claim. But let's see. Since Volk is saying he needs fights to stay sane, I have heard fighters quote in a few interviews feeling the same. I saw this as a red flag, but seems to be the norm. Are most fighters like this? Yes. Most fighters, from what I have talked to or heard from, basically believe that once something is on the calendar and they can pick it, they can look at it, now everything in their life has structure and has meaning. And remember, if you're coming off of a loss, which he wasn't before the second Islam fight, but if you're coming off of a loss, it has even more purpose because you've been hanging on to this notion of defeat for God knows how long. And so it's this direction, it's order, it's everything, and then there's payday behind it. Like, it's so you might fight 2 times a year, 3 times a year. These things have enormous value. Yes. Now, if you're doing it to if you're doing what Volk did, which was you're very much unprepared for the moment, well, then there can be some real costs to it. But as a general rule, are fighters inclined to take fights as a means of reestablishing order and purpose in their day-to-day lives? Yes, that is very clearly true. Oh, Luke, I'd asked you this before, but it never quite materialized when you had your Sirius show. But do you have any interest in interviewing Infinite Elgintensity at all? I looked at his Instagram the other day. He hasn't updated it in 3 years or something. I don't even know if he's still doing his stuff anymore. I don't know if it would make sense at this point. I mean, I've gotten a great laugh out of his. He calls the CrossFit Games the washed up loser Olympics. He calls it the washed up loser Olympics, and he just shits on them. That's very funny. But I haven't seen a whole lot. Maybe I'm missing something, but I haven't seen a whole lot recently. Michael, thank you for becoming a member. Eric asks, is Chito's style the kryptonite to O'Malley? It might be. Feels to me Sean would have to up his volume significantly to have a chance against Chito. This is what I said before. Dude, is Chito's case for a title shot better than Corey Sandhagen's? Of course it's not. Of course it's not. I don't even think Chito would tell you that. Would tell you otherwise. He got 50-45 by the guy. What's he going to say? I have a better case? But I interviewed Chito. Even he knows that they have a special thing, he and Sean O'Malley, this rivalry, and the thing that has kind of plagued Sean, not more recently, but for a time in his career, that he was injury prone, brittle, kind of has not gone away completely. And Chito still is the most durable guy maybe in MMA and gets better as the fight goes on. So it's like, dude, he is a tough bastard. He's hard to hurt. He gets better as the fight gets longer. And yeah, I mean, if those things about Sean are true, which, probably are overstated, but we can't say for sure, I understand the reasoning behind this fight completely. All right, Johnston asks, do you think with his cultural cachet and fighting prowess that Bryce Hall would make a good fit in the UFC? Is this the... who the fuck is Bryce Hall? Hold on. He's the guy... I saw him on... He's on... He was on BKFC. Bryce Hall is an American social media personality and boxer. He is most known for his videos on TikTok and YouTube. He has 24 million followers. Jesus Christ. What is Lord? He's from Ellicott City, Maryland, too. Wow. 24 years old. Yeah, shoot me in the face, everyone. My answer to that question is, please shoot me in the fucking face for what a failure I've become. All right, my gentleman just put in a donation. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. All right, Corin asks, if humans had 4 arms like some Pokemon guy, would striking be more fun or more boring? I have no fucking idea. Probably better. You'd be like, what, Goro from Mortal Kombat or whatever? If you had 4 arms, I would imagine it would enhance your grappling significantly as well. Ground and pound would be legit. That's a weird question, dude. Happy belated Veterans Day. Yeah, thanks. I thank you not only for your service to this country, but to the MMA community. Well, thanks, dude. I appreciate that. A lot of better characters to thank than me, but I'll take it just the same. Did you see what Jamahal Hill said about his strategy for fighting Poatan? I did not. But, he might say one thing now and do a different thing then. So the thing I judge them on is what they do, not so much what they say. I know you were both with SBN Vox Media, but Spencer Hall would be an incredible guest for a general convo or lifting. Dude, so Spencer Hall I know very well, EDSBS. Every day should be Saturday. That's his screen name, which was the site he ran when he was at SB Nation. We covered the John Jones versus Rashad Evans fight in Atlanta together. So I know Spencer real well. He's the man. Shouts to Spencer. Fucking Spencer is great. And if you like college football, not just that, but if you like college football, he's your man. Holy shit balls. Look at this donation. Bone Hunter. I mean, that sounds like porn. This man must be a pornographer. I don't even know. But I'll take that. Holy shit balls, man. Thanks, dude. Or lady, whoever you are. That's real nice, dude. Thank you. I don't know what to say, Bone Hunter, except enjoy that pornography. All right. Poll results. Didn't get many. Who wins? Oh, y'all giving Hill no chance. No chance. Okay, I guess we'll see. All right, Henry asks, true or false, and really thinking about it, Conor McGregor fights at 300. True. I know what John Kavanaugh said, but still. John Jones will never fight Stipe. False. Bud Crawford TKOs Spence again. True. Wilder KOs Joshua when they fight. Definitely true. Tank fights Pacquiao. Ooh. Tank fights Pacquiao. Well, I can tell you what I want to say. I want to say false. Ooh. Tank fights Pacquiao. Fuck, man. Is Gervonta going to fight Tank? Sorry, is Gervonta going to fight Pacquiao? I'll say false. It's a good question, though. In your time in the gym, did you train with people who preferred the opposite stance of their dominant hand? Only a couple times. E.g., many right-handed wrestlers prefer southpaw. Yes, I've seen that. They call it sugarfoot. And Poirier is right-handed as well. Yeah. Yeah, I've seen that a little bit. I actually saw that, believe it or not, and I think it just was anecdotal. I don't think this is quite true. I actually saw that a little bit more in the boxing gym than I did anywhere else. Boxing and then wrestling was where I saw it most. I didn't see it so much with like Muay Thai guys. Again, just as strictly anecdotal. I have no way of knowing to what extent that's a larger pattern. But yes, I definitely did see it, and it hurts. Like when they jab you with their lead power hand, it fucking hurts, man. Henry asks again, do you think there's a chance Joe Rogan will ever invite you, BC, and Shab to do a fight companion? No, there's a 0% chance of that. Thoughts on why or why not? Well, one, I don't know if BC would be up for hanging out with Shab. Don't know. I don't know if Shab would be up for hanging out with BC. More to the point, Rogan doesn't even return my text messages anymore. I haven't sent him one in a while, but, that thing he said at the end of our conversation ended up being far more important than I realized at the time. So, yeah, I guess that ship sailed. What are you going to do? Reed says, do you have a top 3 or top 5 favorite moment of a fighter realizing they're the champ? For me, it's either the emotional moment when Jamahal Hill became champ or the last 20 seconds of Strickland. That was a big one. When Randy beat Tim Sylvia, for me, it's probably got to be the tops because that was so unlikely. That was a big one. Kane beating Brock wasn't as big, but it was big. How about Holly Holm beating Ronda? Right? When she's like, she can barely contain herself, like walking around, like touching her face, That joke was terrible for the other guy. Yeah, okay. All right, I don't know. I mean, I guess I just got with something. I don't know what it is. All right. Felipe asks, how weird and predictable is the silence on MMA and sports media in general regarding the release of fighter pay? Yeah, I mean, we basically know what a lot of the biggest names in the sport have made in the last, at least for a portion of time anyway. And there's, not much acknowledgement. I will tell you, though, that the goalpost shifting on this one has been absolutely delicious to watch. Where before it was like, even when the court documents were out, and I've been saying, like, go fucking look at them, you don't get that anymore. People have been like, oh, it's just not true. They don't make 20% or less. And like now there's no denial of it. But what you do get is, oh yeah, they get 20% or less because that's fair and awesome and good. They've stopped denying that the numbers are true, and more are now telling you that the numbers are true but also awesome. Which is basically them surrendering. That's more or less a surrender. But, listen, here's what I have noticed that people really want. They want, hey, so-and-so knocked out so-and-so in the gym. So-and-so said a bunch of mean things on social media. Hey, let's take pictures with, the promoter at the event. Let's take pictures with the promoter's guests at the event. They want everything to be nice. They want everything to be fun. They want everything to be frivolous. They want everything to just be this enjoyable thing. And I understand that. If you're a fan, why would you not want it to be fun? But in order to do that, you have to absolutely carve the piece of your brain out that has any critical thinking skills associated with it whatsoever. And again, ignorance is bliss. People do that shit. Like it's the way of the world, y'all. It's the way of the world. But what it is affirmatively not is journalism, and what it is affirmatively not is curious. These are deeply, deeply, deeply incurious people. Like they just have no curiosity about the world whatsoever. Don't give a fuck. And also, it's just a lot of people who are, these are people who love. I said it before, man. I'll tell you what. If these fighters end up getting their way, and they undo the order of everything, right? All the people downstream who have benefited from this order are gonna be pissed. Ooh, they're gonna be pissed. They're gonna be so pissed because they have tied all of their either livelihood or their, free time or energy or financial situation or whatever. They've all tied it into this situation that required the existing market structure to stay in place. And there are so many people who just love benefiting from that. I mean, listen, I've never been a super happy person, so it's hard for me to get here and make a convincing argument to you about how you should be unhappy about the state of MMA. I don't know how to make that argument to someone, nor am I even really sure that that is the argument, but rather, well, I love the fights. I think you guys love the fights. I will probably always love the fights. But once you learn how the sausage is made, it is very, very hard to unlearn it. It is very, very hard to not see it anymore. It is very, very hard to look the other way. And the people who can do that with all the information that we have and then look the other way, I have no respect for these people. Zero. Fucking none. None at all. Now, some people are in denial. That's not who I'm talking about. The people who are still in denial, who have to be, you can't insult your way into getting them to believe you. You have to convince them. That's not who I'm talking about. There's a lot of people who need convincing. Fair enough. The people who don't need convincing, the people who can look at it and be like, I just don't give a fuck, like fuck these people. I like what I like. I'm a beneficiary of the established order. It's just going to be what it's going to be, tough titties. I don't have an ounce of respect for these people, including there's media folks like that. There's been media folks who have been, slave isn't the right word. There have been media folks who have spent their career covering the sport, lying to the public about the truth on behalf of established power, so the established power could maintain the order that they benefit from. I don't have respect for these people. I don't have respect for their opinion. I don't have respect for their career. And some of them have bigger audiences than me. Some have smaller. It runs the gamut. But I don't know how you could do this job and wake up every day and know what the actual truth is and then just decide you're not going to pay attention to it. I don't know how to turn that. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how someone could. I mean, they do. People do it. I get that they do it, and this isn't some grand like, oh, I have made all the most moral decisions. Like, I literally don't even understand how it's possible. I'm not talking about like making a very difficult moral choice where like great sacrifice is in order. I've done all right. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about leveling with the audience. Just leveling with them. If you can't even level with the audience, what the fuck are you doing in this job? What the fuck are you doing in this job, man? This dude or person became a member. Thank you. Luke, really enjoyed your sit down with Sandhagen. I thought the flow of the interview and the vibe between you two was dope. Any other thinking fighters of that ilk you'd like to have one-on-one with? Well, I'm going to go back to that gym. I'm going to do one with Ryan Hall. So that will be one that will be, I told him as soon as he gets a fight booked, and he might have one booked coming up, we're going to go right back there and do the same thing with him. So that'll be a lot of fun. But, it just requires a fighter being in this area. And there are some fighters over at Team Lloyd Irvin, but I don't feel it's appropriate for me to go over there. So I have to pass on those. Question for me. All right, thoughts on John Nash and Chael Sonnen beefing about UFC contracts? Weird to see Chael being such a shill even away from the UFC. I mean, I love Chael, and I've known Chael for a long time, and Chael's always been great. We had a beef one time. You can see that video might still be up. You can go and see that. We squashed it. Yeah, I mean, I don't think John Nash is anything but correct. I've been, I love Chael, but I find his arguments on this very unpersuasive. That's my personal opinion. I'm not going to sit here and bash Chael. I like Chael a lot. I think Chael's been great for the game in general, but his arguments on this have just been, like, I saw one was that like the UFC couldn't book Jones versus Ngannou because it'd be illegal for the UFC to like try and sign the services of Francis, but that's not really an actual rebuttal to anything anyone is saying. Yes, of course, if they tried to interfere with his PFL contract, that would be illegal, but that's not the mechanism by which you would do it. It's just UFC goes to PFL and says you want to make it, and then there is, negotiations that happen with all the parties thereafter. There is nothing stopping them from making it. So like saying, yes, you can't interfere with his contract, that is technically true, but also irrelevant. So, John has been very convincing to me, and it's because the evidence is on his side. And I think everyone should kind of wake up to that fact. Oh, wait, hold on. From this person. Why hasn't a UFC fighter applied for a boxing license and used the Ilia claim they're a boxer now to get out of their UFC contract? Because they'd have to challenge it in court. Has there not been a martyr willing to do this? This has been something we've been wondering that someone... Oh, excuse me. Whoops. This has been something we've been wondering that somebody might try that they haven't tried yet. But you would have to just be willing to fight this out in court. And these guys' careers are that long. Like, you don't have time or the overall ability to do it. That's why. Where did I leave off? Oh, here we go. Tony says, would love to hear your thoughts on the Palestinian genocide. Yeah. I haven't commented on it publicly very much. You know what's funny? I'll say this. You know what? I think I can even pull it up. Let's see. Let me show this to you. I want to show you something. I don't know if you guys ever saw this. Here we go. All right. Let me pull this up here. Okay, I'm going to show you this tweet. And let me see if I can do this correctly. Jesus Christ, I got a million different fucking windows open. Oh, for crying out loud. No, not now. Oh, Christ on crutches. Here we go. Okay. Let me move this back over here. All right, now. Let me show you this one. Oh, for fuck's sake. Is this it? Yeah. All right. Let me show you this. Oops. Fucking A. Hold on. If you can't read it, I will blow it up so you can. This is what I wrote in 2018. Look at the date, October 22nd, 2018. Quote, this doesn't get much mention, and I don't have the right answers, but there is a growing international concern of Israel becoming an apartheid state. Bellator hosting events there relatively consistently merits at least a question of where these organizations stand on these issues. I bring this up to say a few things, if I may. Pull this back over here. I bring this up to say a few things, if I may. Do you remember, was it 1 or 2 weeks ago that folks were saying I was being unusually harsh? I think you remember Justin Gaethje was getting after me and some other folks just about how unfair I was to Arab governments. Guys, show me any other MMA media member who has, besides Kareem Zidane, who has asked questions or, in any kind of way raised concerns all the way back in 2018 about the state of the Israeli government and their treatment of Palestinians and the way in which they had carried their business, that was concerned about it all the way back then. Show me who that was. And I want to tell you a story about that tweet. I've never told this before. Of all the countries that I've ever criticized for any kind of issue, whether it's China and the treatment of the Uyghur Muslims, or the UAE, and we had this whole safe not safe controversy, and then Saudi Arabia executing people and whatever. The only time I've ever gotten an angry phone call from a very powerful corporate entity was when I criticized, or when I tweeted that about Israel. That's the only time that's ever happened. No one's ever called me from a very corporate, powerful entity when I said anything about Saudi Arabia, when I said anything about UAE. Other people might have been mad about it or something like that. But the hell that I had to pay privately for that tweet went on for weeks and months and maybe even years. People being upset about it all the way back in 2018. Folks, not new to this. Not new to this controversy, not new to any of this. And I was the only one, except maybe Kareem Zidane, the only one raising these kinds of issues. Like, who else raised an issue about Bellator going to Israel when they did other than me? Who was it? Who was it? Now, even as I say all of this to you, I don't know if the next thing I say will ultimately force me to get fired or canned or whatever. So I have to be very, very careful in today's climate about that which I say. But it's the same thing I've been saying since all of this. I mean, I haven't, I need to be very careful about this. I think what is going on currently, okay, so you want my personal opinion, very much in favor of a ceasefire. I think a ceasefire is absolutely needed, and frankly, the only moral position at this point. Let me just say this, because I think if I say anything else, I mean, just that tweet alone, you cannot imagine the phone calls I got, and the phone calls I got from who. And that has never happened with any other country I've ever criticized. And again, people got bitter in other ways, like on social media or whatever, about UAE or whatever. But in terms of like, a check yourself moment from a powerful entity down to me, that's the only country that's ever happened for me. And by the way, I've never deleted that tweet, and I never will delete that tweet. I don't regret ever tweeting that, and I think, if anything, we've gotten to a place now where people are more able to examine the greater realities. I will just say this to keep myself, in a reasonable place. One, as I said previously, I think the president has acted in a way that is absolutely despicable and incomprehensible and so morally egregious that I can't even stomach the look of him, and would never, ever, ever, ever be able to forgive him. Not possible. Not possible, nor any of the flax carrying water for what this government and our taxpayer dollars are going towards. Not possible. Cannot forgive him. It is so morally heinous. I cannot do it. I cannot do it. The last thing I would say is my personal belief, and you can take it however you want, unless the powers that be have some kind of political solution to the realities of Palestinian misery, nothing will ever get better. Unless there is some actual plan to acknowledge why, after 75 years, essentially, of a military occupation, or an occupation, but since 1967, a military occupation. Unless there is some kind of political solution, not a military one, to provide the long overdue justice that they are deserved, and to deal with the reality of why their misery exists, I fear, for all parties involved, including innocent Israeli parties, I fear that nothing will ever get better. And I don't think anything ever has gotten better, because there has never been any kind of political solution or will to actually honor the reality of their condition. So what do I think about it? I can't even tell you what I think about it. But I hope that those brief windows into that give you some idea of where I am. And the people, by the way, who didn't like that tweet that I sent in 2018, some of them, we are good people and we just had a difference of opinion. But there's a couple of them that, how do I say this? There's one person in particular I'll tell you about who's kind of behind some of the pushback on that. And it's not who you imagine, by the way. Or maybe it is. I don't know. But probably not. I'll have more to say about that person later. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. All right. Anil says, one thing about Dana White, Francis Ngannou question from a consumer's perspective, when MMA media asks tough questions, forget about journalist ethic. It's a much more engaging product for us consumers. Wait. One thing about the Dana White, okay, when media asks tough questions, right, I mean, controversy and conflict sells. That doesn't make it a better process for the truth. It just makes it better to eat popcorn with. I mean, I agree that it's probably better to eat popcorn with, but it's not helping anything. In fact, it's making things actively worse, and I don't take great joy in that. Sharice Davids. Yes, that's the other MMA fighter from Kansas who is a congresswoman. But she doesn't have quite the name that Markwayne Mullin does, so there you go. After Izzy Shawn, how applicable is a bladed Philly shell style in MMA? Somewhat. What skill sets would best complement such a style, and what influencers, boxers should MMA fighters look to? The thing about this is we kind of discussed it before. Shawn's way of making that work, because he's not nearly as bladed. He's actually a little bit more square. The reality of that situation is that he has refined that over time through trial and error. So, like, what broad lessons can you take? The broad lesson is there's probably more defensive ways to approach an MMA striking contest, but that the way in which he chose is inefficient, but he makes it work because of the time and commitment he put into it when others won't. So he's got this novel style that's like hard to address, but he probably had to make a lot of errors along the way that folks just don't want to deal with when they're coming up on the way. So is it more applicable? Probably, but it requires investment early and then a consistent willingness to work on it. So Anil says, in regards to the fanboyism around Elon or Dana, I never cheerlead for billionaires. It's like a medieval peasant cheering for the feudal lords. Also, more to the point, like, dude, if you're a millionaire, I've said this on this live chat, if you're a millionaire, you don't get to say you can't be made fun of. Like, if you're filthy rich, people can shit on you. You can't say shit back. That's just how it goes. Like, eat shit. You just have to take it. Not unfair, like cancel culture shit. I'm not talking about that. But like, funny insults, you just have to take it. Reed says, I feel like everyone relishes the moments you say, good question. BC's face seems to light up when you acknowledge a solid one. In the realm of MMA, what do you think constitutes a good question? Someone asking precisely what the real essence of something is about. Or we have to figure out where this is headed. What does it really come down to? When you can distill something to its essential elements and make it really about that, that's a good question. Brian says, love to get your thoughts on the DC Rogan combo. DC is not well-spoken. That's not true. And they are so premature on submission calls. That is true. Give me Senko Felder all day. Laura Senko is the best color commentator they have. People are like, oh, you're saying that because she's a woman and blah, 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 blah. Dude, sorry. By any measurement, she's the best one. And I think she doesn't like it when I say that. She's never told me this. But I don't think she likes it when I say that because I think it puts a bit of a magnifying glass on some of the weaknesses of the other ones. No one is as technically detailed as Laura Senko. That's a fucking fact. Listen to me very clearly. Not one of the other commentators in the broad scope of MMA, like DC obviously really knows wrestling, but in the broad scope of MMA, none of them are as technically adept and sharp and quick with the sort of reference material as Laura Senko. On top of that, she does fuck tons of homework, and it shows. Dude, she's over-prepared for these things, not under. So first of all, she's the best one they got. And by the way, Felder's great as well. Like, he's a strong, strong addition to a team. I agree. Her and Felder working together, 2 thumbs up, no complaints. The DC Rogan combo, I actually don't mind when they're... The problem is they end up turning into a podcast where they get a little bit chummy, and then they're kind of cracking jokes and having a good time. And if that's for you, that's for you. But I think for a lot of people, including me, I would rather them dial down the chumminess. I don't want them to be adversaries. Like, I never liked it when Jim Lampley and what's-his-face were, like, trying to out-Shakespeare the other guy. It seems so. Not Max Kellerman, but the Howard Letterman. Or no. Was it him? Harold Letterman? Who the fuck was it? The other guy. The one who told Mayweather, I'm going to kick your ass. What was his name? God, what the fuck? Anyway. That's I don't want too distant, remote, professorial nonsense like that either. But something in between, I think, is a little bit better. The problem is when Rogan and DC get together, it's too podcasty. It's not commentary. It's a different thing. Gator says, is a certain MMA YouTuber so impactful that you must censor his name from the super chat? I don't know who that might be. I don't know. All right, let's see. I don't watch a lot of MMA YouTube. All right. Yvonne says, if nobody knew how good Francis would be against Tyson Fury, how can anyone say he was underprepared? How could he prepare for someone? What? If nobody knew how good Francis would be against Tyson, how could we say he was underprepared? How can anyone say he was how can anyone say that Fury was underprepared? The question was whether or not, like, did he watch tape? Did he take it seriously? Did he do the rounds? Did he do the sparring? There's a debate about that. It just looked like he didn't do the requisite work to be ready for that moment, even with the awkwardness. I don't know what rounds he did, but it kind of looks that way, right? Reed says, can you hear the commentary when you go to a live fight? Not usually. Recently, I've found that the commentary can kind of ruin intense moments in fights. Do you think the UFC should allow you to turn off commentary? They used to offer alternate commentary. You can hear Spanish commentary. And they've kind of gotten, I think you can still hear Spanish, obviously, but in general, like the alternate commentary or like just hearing the corners. You used to be able to get that on Fight Pass. You can't get that now. So it's like, I preferred it when they gave you choices, but, to each his own. All right, let's get through this. We've been going for 2 hours. If you could watch and listen to two people, dead or alive, have a 2-hour podcast, who would you choose? Dead or alive? Jesus. Yeah, you know what? Right now, it would be Edward Said and whoever could be a good interview with him. How about that? Edward Said. Ben, thank you for becoming a member. Lydian, 84. No question, just thanks. By the way, your interview with Corey Sandhagen was exceptional. Yes, thank you. And then last from Ben. Yeah, thanks, dude. All right. That's a long one. It's a long one. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. You are the best. This will be up on podcast either tonight or first thing tomorrow morning. I'm going to change out the thumbnail. I appreciate you guys. Thanks to Othello for being here, as well as everybody else. Thanks for taking the polls. You can email me, lukethomasnews@gmail.com. And until next time, folks, stay frosty.